Welcome to episode 36 in this chess puzzle adventure series starring Bobby Fischerman, Average Joe, and Peter Potzer. Previously, 2 episodes back, Peter Potzer and Average Joe had tried to cross the Black Lagoon, but did not make it, and decided to take the long way around to go to the Dragon's Lair. Shortly after they had set out on their journey and headed south, a groundhog popped its head up and said, "Hey, where are you guys going?" They said, "We're going to the Dragon's Lair." The groundhog said, "Aha, well, I know something very interesting about the dragon that you might want to know, and if you can solve my chess puzzle, I'll tell you what it is." Average Joe and Peter Potzer were very intrigued to hear what the groundhog had to say, and they said, "Okay, what's the puzzle?" And with that, the groundhog presented to them the following position. All right, here's the position. It's white to play and win. White's pawns are going forward in this direction. Black's pawns are going down the board. This is a very complicated position, despite the fact there are not a lot of pieces that can move. Before I say anything else, it's white to play and win. What do you think the winning move is? Well, if you had a chance to look at that, the only winning move in this position for white is the move knight to b3. And exactly why it's the winning move is not immediately apparent. So first of all, let's back up a second and take a look at some of the other options. First of all, the most obvious move here of capturing the pawn does not work. And here is why. Black will simply play g takes f6. And what black is trying to do is set up a stalemate. If you look carefully, none of black's pieces can move, which means white has to do something that gives black a move, which means the only move you can really play is knight to e5 because you have to give black the option to take you. However, after they capture, you capture back, they're just going to play f4. And again, it's kind of the same situation. Whatever you try to do, let's just say king g5, for example, they're just going to push this pawn forward. And whenever you take it, it's a stalemate. Black has no moves. There's really no way to get around that after you take the pawn here on d3. Black is always going to be able to force that stalemate. Okay, the other option here is what happens if you capture this pawn and just don't worry about this guy. Just try to go and get your queen, right? So let's take a look at that one. H takes g7. Black's going to, of course, push their pawn, try to get a queen. And when you get the queen, watch what happens. They take your knight, but at the same time, defend their bishop, so you're not in time to actually take it. And you could try to do some stuff like bring your king forward and maybe go hunting for these pawns. But watch what black's going to do. Queen to h1. And when you move here, black has an incredible move. If you'd like to pause, what do you think black's move is? Well, if you had a chance to look at that, the move is simply queen to h6 check. And the point is that if you take it, again, black is stalemated. Look at this. None of black's pieces can move. You can't take it. If you try to run, queen to g6 actually forces the trade. And then again, if you take the pawn, it's a stalemate. So same kind of thing also leads to a stalemate. Okay. Going back to the original position, we talked about capturing here. Basically the same thing would happen if you took with this pawn, similar kind of stuff. We talked about capturing here. So the only winning move is knight to b3. Now at this point, black has a couple of ways they could approach the position. The main line that we're going to look at is if they push the pawn to d2. But before we talk about that, let's just talk about their options. So for example, they could also play something like g6, check. And if they do that, again, we have to be careful that we don't fall into the stalemate trap of blockading all the pawns. So what we do is king to h4. And we give black some options. And now, really, they don't have a lot of good. They can either go here or they can go here. But regardless of what they do, they're going to get checkmated. For example, if they play d2, we simply take it. And when they go here, we simply take this way. And watch carefully. There's an idea here that we're going to see again. When they play f4, how do we avoid the stalemate? You had a chance to look at that. The move is g6. So we sacrifice a pawn. It doesn't matter how they capture. It opens up one of our pawns to come down. And when they go here, this is a key move. We don't take the pawn. Just move our king somewhere. Allow them the option to have some moves. We come down here, get the queen, and we get checkmate next move. Okay, so that's pretty interesting stuff, right? So that's what happens if they just immediately try to play g6 check. But what if they capture this pawn over here right away and they don't push this? What should we do? White to play and win. If you had a chance to look at that, this one is fascinating, but we actually play the move knight to d4, which allows the pawn to become a queen. Why? Because after d2, we're going to play knight to b5, and after black gets the queen, notice it's not check because our pawn is blocking, and we can simply come in for the checkmate on c7. Pretty nice way to finish the game. Okay, so that doesn't quite work for black. So we looked at what happens if they push the pawn. We looked at what happens if they capture, and that's why the main line here is pawn to d2. Black simply pushes it forward, trying to get a queen. White to play. What should we play here? If you had a chance to look at that, we do need to take the pawn. If you said, capturing here doesn't quite work because once black gets the queen, yes, we can get a queen too, but black is actually the one who's going to start off with the checks. And I think black's actually winning this position because their queen gets to initiate first. So we do have to take the pawn. So knight takes d2. And again, we have some interesting options for black. g6 is kind of similar to what we already talked about. We just give them some moves, right? Capture, and then we've seen this idea before. We play g6, whichever way they take, we're going to push the other pawn and get a queen, okay? So black, if they're smart, are going to play g takes f6, and again, setting up the stalemate. So white to play, how do we not stalemate black? You had a chance to look at that. The move is knight to e4. It's the only way to give black a move, and so here we're sacrificing our knight to allow them some captures. Now it's white to play and win. What should we play next? You had a chance to look at that. We do need to capture the pawn. And I guess the only other move you maybe could try would be like king g4, but then black can just play e3. Yes, you can come down here and hunt down the pawn, but after f5 captures and f6, you have no way to avoid the stalemate. Black has successfully blockaded everything, and it's simply a draw. Okay, so here we do need to capture the pawn. Black only has one move, f5. And now, again, white to play and win. What should we play here? You had a chance to look at that. The move is e5. And of course, you don't want to take because then black simply plays f6. And again, everything is stuck. We can't do anything. So we play e5. Black's only move is f6. And now it's kind of tricky, but white to play and win. If you had a chance to look at that, of course, you can't take because, again, it's a stalemate. So the only way to win is to actually just drop your king back, and you're just kind of waiting. You're just saying, okay, black, go ahead, capture this pawn. I'm giving you something to do so that I don't stalemate you. Black takes the pawn, and now it's white to play and win again. If you had a chance to look at that, the move is f takes e5, okay? And we have given black this pawn to move. So, again, keeping up with the theme, don't stalemate black, right? So they play f4, and now it's white to play and win. What's the move here? You had a chance to look at that. This is a very tricky moment in the puzzle. The move is king to h3, only winning move. And let's talk about why. If you play king to g4 to try to just get the pawn, well, they're just going to push it. And when you take it, of course, we already talked about it, it's a stalemate. Nothing can move for black, right? So you don't want to do that. The other option is maybe you said, well, I'll push this to give black some more things to move. The problem here is that after they take this, you can't actually hunt down the pawns. e5 check unleashes the bishop, defends the pawns, and after bishop f5, your king can't come in. If you push this, you lose it, and I think this is actually a losing position for white. So king to h3 is a brilliant move here because it essentially just waits a move, forces black to push the pawn, and now white to play and win. If you had a chance to look at that, now you play e6 because now it's different. Because now when black captures, well, they could play f2 or they could capture. But now if they capture, you simply come over here and you take the pawn. It doesn't really matter what they do. Let's say they go here, you simply take this. And now it's a different story because after this, you can just waste a move. And black has a problem. Black's problem is they need to keep their bishop here so that you don't come up and take their pawn. They also need to keep their bishop here to stop this. And they can't do both. If they go here to keep control of this, you get the queen like this. And if they go here, it lets you come up and take this. And if they push, you just simply bring your king up. They have to stop this. And then you take this. Your king's going to come up, grab the pawn, and you're going to have two threats that black can't stop with only one bishop. Okay. Hopefully that made sense. Now, the other option that black has here is instead of taking, they can play f2. But you can also win this relatively straightforward. You play king to g2, stopping the pawn, and essentially black's in the same situation. Yes, they can do this if they want, or they can capture here. But once you take this, your king now basically can kind of come up like this, and eventually you take the pawn at the right moment, or you come over here, depending on what black is going to do. Like if black just goes back and forth, you would win that way. And if they push the pawn, you would take it. And eventually you're going to have these two threats. So just an example, let's say we go here. Black's going back and forth. We can invade with our king like this. Sorry, capture the pawn, and black can't really stop it. The other thing black could do would be to, let's just say, push this. Same kind of thing, just waste some time. And eventually they have to let us in. We take this, and you can see it's too much for black to handle, right? Just something like this would work. And you can, push. You can play, actually, king g8 is probably the way to do it. And black has to guard here, and then they give up the pawn. Okay, so that's the idea. Actually, super complicated endgame because of all those stalemate traps. But the only way to do it was knight to b3, capture the pawn, sacrifice the knight, constantly allow black all those moves, and ultimately get the victory. Now, when Peter Potzer saw this position, he really began to get confused. He was having a hard time determining if he should play knight to b3 or if he should take here first. He wasn't sure if he wanted to go knight to e5. He wasn't sure if he wanted to take. He ultimately did find the right move, but he was really having difficulty. Average Joe looked at him and said, "Are you feeling okay?" Peter said, "Yeah, I think so, but I just don't feel as sharp as I normally do." Nevertheless, since he solved the puzzle correctly, the Groundhog said, "And now I will share with you what I know about the dragon." He said, "Just remember, when you meet the dragon, that things are not always as they seem." And with that, he went back into his hole and disappeared. Peter Potzer and Average Joe didn't know what that meant, but they made a mental note to remember that when they did finally meet the dragon. And that's where we'll pick up our story next time. Thanks for watching, and happy adventures on the chessboard.